There is a beach on Earth that no human being had ever touched by the time the Magna Carta was signed. Not touched by anyone. Not a hunter, not a farmer, not a single footprint in the sand, anywhere, ever. While Rome was rising and falling, while the pyramids were already 3,000 years old, while Genghis Khan was building an empire, this place sat completely alone. Then, one day, you step out of a canoe and onto that sand. Why did it take so long for anyone to find it? That island is New Zealand, and you are one of the first people in human history to ever see it. Picture the scale of that for a second. Humans reached Australia around 50,000 years ago. We were painting caves in France 17,000 years before we ever saw these shores. Entire civilizations rose and collapsed. Sumer, Egypt, the Maya. While this landmass, bigger than the United Kingdom, sat untouched by anyone. It is, by a wide margin, the last major habitable landmass on Earth to be settled by human beings. So who finally got there, and how did anyone even find it? The answer comes down to navigation, and to guts most of us can barely imagine. Polynesian voyagers, your ancestors in this scenario, were sailing double-hulled canoes called Waka Hurua across the largest ocean on the planet, guided by stars, ocean swells, and the flight patterns of birds. No compass, no maps, just centuries of accumulated knowledge passed down through memory and song. Somewhere around 1280 AD, one of those canoes finds land where the charts, if there had been charts, showed nothing at all. We actually know that date with unsettling precision. A researcher named Janet Wilmshurst, working with archaeologist Athol Anderson, cracked this open using something almost absurdly small: rat bones and gnawed seeds. Polynesian voyaging canoes carried Pacific rats as stowaways, intentionally or not. Every place those rats landed, they left teeth marks on seeds and bones that could later be radiocarbon dated, a technique that measures the decay of a radioactive form of carbon to figure out how long ago an organism died. Wilmshurst's team dated the earliest rat-gnawed material in New Zealand and got a strikingly narrow window. Human arrival, they concluded, happened within decades of 1280 AD. Not centuries of quiet, gradual settlement. A defined, almost sudden moment. Now stand in your own footprints for a second. You step off that canoe soaking wet, muscles shaking from weeks at sea, and the first thing you notice is the silence. Not silence like an empty room. Silence like a world that has literally never heard the sound of a human voice. That silence should be the first shock, because it isn't just quiet, it's occupied, just not by anything that recognizes you as a threat. Walk a little further inland and you meet the birds. Not sparrows, not pigeons. You meet a bird standing taller than you, wandering calmly through the undergrowth like it owns the place, because for millions of years it has. This is the moa, a flightless giant that had no predators, no instinct to flee, no fear of anything walking on two legs. Some species stood over 3 meters tall. It doesn't run from you. It has literally never needed to. Isn't that the part that should terrify you a little? Not the size of the animal, but the fact that it has no idea what you are. Overhead, something else is watching. Haast's eagle, the largest eagle known to have ever existed, with a wingspan close to 3 meters and talons built to take down prey the size of a small deer. In this world, without you, the moa was its main course. With you standing in the clearing, the eagle doesn't know what to make of the new animal that just arrived. For the first time in this ecosystem's entire existence, something has walked in that the food chain never accounted for. Here's the shock beat that should really stop you. This ecosystem had been evolving in total isolation for roughly 80 million years, since New Zealand split off from the ancient supercontinent Gondwana. 80 million years of birds filling roles mammals usually fill elsewhere, because there were no mammals here to fill them. No rats, no deer, no wolves, nothing with fur except a few bats. 80 million years of quiet, isolated evolution, and it takes less than 2 centuries after your canoe lands for most of it to be gone. Let that sit with you for a second. 2 centuries. Blink, and it's over, geologically speaking. Let's slow down and actually live in that moment on the beach, because this is worth picturing clearly. It's early afternoon. Salt is still drying on your skin. The canoe behind you creaks against volcanic sand that's never carried a human footprint. Somewhere in the tree line, a moa lifts its head at the unfamiliar shape of you, chews slowly, and goes back to feeding, entirely unbothered. Behind it, a fern the size of a small tree unfurls in wind that has never once carried wood smoke. You are standing in the last untouched room in the house of the world, and you don't fully know it yet. Neither does anything else standing there with you. Within a single human lifetime, one lifetime, not 10 generations, the moa is functionally extinct. Hunted for meat, its eggs raided, its habitat cleared by fire, an animal that survived 80 million years without a natural predator disappears within roughly 100 to 150 years of your arrival. Haast's eagle, deprived of its main prey, follows it into extinction not long after. An ecosystem that took longer to build than most mountain ranges takes less than 2 centuries to fundamentally collapse once one new animal walks into the picture. And here is the twist that should really flip your stomach. You'd assume the ancient world was the fragile one, slow, primitive, easily wiped out by a changing climate or a wandering predator. You'd assume it takes thousands of years of grinding pressure to end something that old. It doesn't. It takes one boat. One species, arriving with fire, tools, and a taste for eggs, does in a few generations what 80 million years of storms, ice ages, and volcanic eruptions couldn't do. The wilderness wasn't ancient and unbreakable. It was ancient and extremely breakable. It had simply never been tested by something like you. So what does an 80-million-year-old ecosystem, gone in under 2 centuries, actually have to do with your life right now? More than you'd think. We tend to assume that whatever world we're born into is the permanent one, the default setting, the way things have always been and will always be. The moa probably assumed the same thing about its silence. Every generation looks at its landscape, its habits, its normal, and quietly mistakes this is how it's always been for this is how it will always be. But permanence is almost always an illusion built on a short enough timeline. The version of your city from 30 years ago is already a foreign country to the people who grew up there. The habits you think are just who you are were built the same way that isolated ecosystem was, slowly, in the absence of anything strong enough to challenge them. And they can unravel the same way too, fast, once the right pressure finally shows up. Maybe the real question isn't whether your world will change. It's whether you'd even notice yourself becoming the new predator in someone else's quiet, undisturbed life. Today, you can fly into Auckland in 11 hours and order a coffee within a mile of where those first canoes might have landed. Rental cars line up where moa once grazed without fear. It's easy to forget that this was the last quiet place. But there is still a beach on Earth that no human being had ever touched until a canoe full of exhausted, salt-crusted travelers finally found it. And if you'd stepped out onto that sand yourself, you would have been standing in the very last untouched room in the house of the world.